Hi everyone, this is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. With me today, I have Stephanie Mansueto from Scribble Live. We'll be discussing best practices for creating infographics, something near and dear to my heart. I'll give you a chance to say hi, Stephanie.
Hey there, everyone.
So before we begin and before Stephanie starts sharing this awesome information from the team at Scribble Live with you, I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Just to let everyone know, if you're currently attending and you want to share great information, sound bites, tidbits, etc. on Twitter and other social media platforms, our official hashtag is hashtag SEJThinkTank. And then you can also see Stephanie's handle at the bottom as well. So feel free to let your friends know all the great information you're learning today. Give them the fear of missing out if they're not attending the webinar. And yeah, we love it to see things shared on Twitter. So thanks so much. Stephanie's presentation is going to be about 35 to 40 minutes or so. After the presentation, we're going to be having a Q&A. So if you have any questions that come up while she's presenting, please feel free to enter them into the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Then what I'll be doing at the end of the presentation is putting together some of the best questions to ask Stephanie and have a conversation around. If we can't get to everything today or every single question that comes in, we'll go ahead and send them out during the recap. Also, speaking of recaps, just to let everyone know, because this is the question that we get the most, this video and slides are going to be made available to attendees and registrants after the webinar. So if there's great information that you'd like to have on hand, we'll be sending that out to you via email, and then also a recap on Search Engine Journal. And expect to see the video from this webinar live on our Search Engine Journal YouTube channel in the future as well. Also, we'll be launching one poll during the webinar that gives Stephanie and myself just some great insight on your experience in the world of infographics and content marketing. And on that note, Stephanie, I'd like to go ahead and hand things over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you guys for having me today and for joining today's webinar. As Lauren said, my name is Stephanie Mansueto. I'm the Senior Director of Content Strategy at Scribble Live. More specifically, what I do here is I oversee our creative services team as well as our content strategy program. Our creative services team consists of designers, creative strategists such as myself, and some editorial writers who focus on creating content for our customers. And one of the things that we create quite a bit of is interactive infographics, but also some interactive experience such as assessments and quizzes and calculators and things like that. But for today, we are just going to be focusing on infographics, and we're going to cover a lot. We're going to cover, a definition of what exactly is an infographic and who is really reading them. We're going to also talk a little bit on how to gather data for an infographic. Where do you look? What kind of data do you use? And we're also going to talk about how to compile all of that data and all of that research and to turn it into something that is beautiful, and how to design that infographic using that data. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can add interactivity to your infographics. So lots to cover today, but we're going to get to all of it. So let's kick this off by defining what exactly an infographic is. So in its most simple form, an infographic is a graphic, either an image or a long web page that is compiled of multiple graphics. Sometimes those graphics are data points that are presented in charts or graphs. But no matter what style, most infographics have minimal text. But they're structured in a way that is easy to understand. And the word infographic comes from a merger of the words information and graphic. So it's exactly what it says. So there are several types of infographics. Each type of infographic is defined by the goal of that infographic. Also the content that's used within them. And the story that those infographics are trying to tell. So data visualizations are probably the most common infographic that marketers are searching for and landing on. They include data points, Usually they're results from a survey. Sometimes they can be trends that have been identified. And data visualizations are, really trying to accomplish exactly what their name implies, making data more visual and easy to understand. If it's easy to understand and it's more visual, then ultimately it's probably going to be information that is easier to retain. Information design doesn't always include data or charts or graphs, but instead it organizes concepts to tell a story. And information design is often presented in things like timelines or flowcharts. And then there's editorial infographics. These are often used by publications. They include a lot more copy than a traditional infographic may have. One publication that I see doing these a lot is the New York Times. They seem to be launching them pretty regularly. And what they do is they mix in data points with nice bold graphics, but each section has long form text to tell a story. And sometimes these editorial infographics can border on being somewhat advertorial. So you got to be wary about the amount of copy that you use, because they might be pushing away from being an infographic. And there are so many other types of infographics. We've seen them in listicles, process infographics, and honestly, I've seen an uptake of resume infographics coming out as well. So lots of different styles. So what is it about infographics that make them so appealing to not just web users, but marketers as well? Well, for starters, research tells us that 65% of people are visual learners. And since infographics are mostly graphical, it's easy to understand why people find them so engaging. And if people like them, then obviously marketers are going to use them. Infographics have been known to increase web traffic by 12%. And often that web traffic is coming from social media platforms where that infographic was shared and promoted. And 12% from one content type is a really impressive uptick in traffic. And it is because of this increase in web traffic that we are now seeing an increase in infographic usage in B2B marketers. Up to 65% of B2B marketers are creating infographics in some capacity to nurture their prospects and their customers. So pretty impressive data. So how do you gather data for your infographic? Well, the first place to start is knowing what data will support your infographic. And you should know that as early on as possible. This is going to help you craft a better story. And data can be pulled from heavy research online, or even a study that you may have conducted. But a great place for you to start is to look to your customers' data for inspiration. Proprietary data is a super untapped resource. We look to our customers for data whenever we're coming up with an idea for a marketing campaign. Whether we're looking for their success stories or even their fails, that's really valuable information for us to share. It's going to help us tell a more unique story, and having our sources be associated with our brand, it really increases the chance that that asset's going to be shared by our other customers or prospects, but it also makes the content and the sources far more credible. And then also, when you do compile all of this research, try to cite industry experts and thought leaders. It always pays to name names. If you've got a great quote from an industry expert, try and include it. Whenever I'm working on an infographic with our marketing team, I dig for supporting quotes from the major players in content marketing, Joe Paluzzi or Seth Godin or Ann Handley, because anyone that's in my industry that's doing content is going to know if Ann Handley or Joe Paluzzi said that this is a great strategy, it's probably something that they should implement. So, find that Rand Fishkin of your industry and include their quotes in your infographic where applicable. See how many names I dropped in that one sentence? Not bad. And then let's not make the mistake of quoting something that that industry expert didn't say. Always confirm your sources. Even though we all know Abraham Lincoln definitely said we should believe everything on the internet, we should, really find out where he originally said that. If it's quoted on someone's blog and they actually don't go ahead and cite their resource, it makes sense for us to dig a little bit deeper. If we can find where it was originally said and cite that source is probably far more credible than the blogger that put it and didn't cite. And we don't want to be blamed for spreading false information, so just always confirm. So how can you confirm your research is accurate? Well, first off, does the author have any credentials? Who are they? And what have they contributed to the industry? What service or product does their website offer? And what is the purpose of that organization? What are they offering to the world from a service or product? And where has the author been cited online outside of their website? Are other people in your industry looking to them for quotes? If not, then you might want to dig a little deeper. And is the website that affiliated with that quote, have a familiar organization also affiliated with them? Sometimes we might see an article on a blog that might be associated with an industry thought leader. So lots of ways that you can confirm. And your research is super important, but your story is what is going to keep people engaged. So make sure that you're mixing in images with your data points to tell a more complete and valuable story, but also, try and mix in a little bit of copy too. Infographics should be light on the copy, but there has to be something in there that moves the story along. Okay, so some of the tools that I use to compile and organize and collaborate on my research are here for you guys to see. Some of them you're probably familiar with. For example, Evernote, super popular tool, free and really easy to use. Great tool to get started with and to collaborate on. Definitely one that I think is a great starter. Google Docs, I think, everybody uses that now. This deck was built in Google Docs, so one that you're probably super familiar with. GoodNotes is something I compile information on when I'm on my iPad. Definitely a cool tool to use. But my favorite of all of the four is Scrivener. It's my favorite, but I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's a really great tool for organizing all of your research into files. And then this way, if you capture all of this data and all this information, it's easy to reference and quote your sources easily later on. So definitely some really great tools for you guys to look up. All right. So now that we have got all of our research compiled, how can we begin the process of designing our infographic? So the first step before we ever start designing, before we ever start doing anything, is we really need to take a step back and define who our audience is. And this goes with any content piece that we create. Clearly defining our target audience should be the very first step in creating our content. Infographic, blog, ebook, it doesn't matter. Who is it for is question number one. So we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, who are these people? Who is our audience? And how is this infographic going to make them more informed on the topic? Knowing the answers to these questions are going to help us craft the right story and also share the most meaningful data for that audience. We're going to go through all of our research and we're going to be able to say, okay, this persona, this person, these are the data points that are going to be the most impactful to that target audience. And we're going to be able to be more successful by doing that first. And then next, we're going to want to determine our infographic style. As discussed in that previous section, there are several types of infographic styles. Each are unique in their own way, and they're really determined based on the audience and the goal of that infographic. So once you define who the audience is, you can take a look at the types of infographics out there and get a sense of what's going to be the most impactful to that audience. And of course, knowing the style of infographic is also going to help us with planning the execution of the design and the content so that we can be realistic with our expectations on when it will be completed and also what kind of resources we're going to have to tap into. Obviously, if it's an editorial infographic, we might need a writer. But if it's just a graphical infographic, we're going to probably be able to lean on just our design team. All right, so once you have a sense of what this infographic will include, it's time to either create a wireframe of your vision, or, if you're lucky, you can assign it to a designer to help you with that. Ideally, at this stage of the process, your writer, designer, and researcher, and potentially your content strategist, will all work together to create a mock-up of how to best tell this story. And depending on your resources, all of that might fall on you or one member of your team, and that's okay. It's my opinion that anyone can create a really great infographic, but having a wireframe created early on will help set you up for success as the project moves closer to completion. All right, so I did include a couple of tools for you guys as well for creating wireframes. Some of these are probably pretty familiar. My team uses a wide range of tools to work on wires, and each designer, I'm sure you guys know, has their own preference on the tools that they use. And I'm pretty lucky that I can be open with them and allow them the ability to find whatever works for them. Sketch is one that a few of them really love, while Balsamic and Adobe XD are others. And of course, you can always use pen and paper or a whiteboard to create a mock-up of your vision too. Over the years, I've had several of my customers email me pictures of a conference room whiteboard with their infographic wireframe, and somehow or another, we're always able to dissect it and get an idea of their vision. So use whatever tools you have really to create something like a wireframe. All right, so don't forget that when you're starting out with your ideation, we need to know what the main success metric is. And this is also really important for any content we create as well. What is the ultimate measure of success for any piece of content? Knowing it early on will set us up properly. And depending on where you place your infographic, if you put it in a blog post or even a landing page in HubSpot or Marketo, or if you send it in an email, you may be lucky that the platform you're using has features that you can mark a link or a button as a conversion point. But when you're trying to pick out what the conversion is going to be, you gotta really choose wisely. And the reason I say that is because if it's a infographic that's being sent to someone early in the buyer journey and you mark a sales form as the conversion point, it just might not be time for that user to take that action. So when I'm working with my customers that are creating infographics, I try and get them to think strategically about, what truly would be a successful metric here. It's not always a contact form. It's not always a lead gen for an infographic. So sometimes I like to, get them to find supporting content. So if you have an infographic that has data from a much larger research report, get users to want to download the research report. If you have a blog post that talks about a similar topic, push users towards that blog post. Don't gate the blog post, but push users towards that blog post and mark that as a success metric, because that's the user moving deeper into the funnel and becoming more engaged with the content that you created. And just a much fairer measurement of success for a piece of content such as this. All right, so once your infographic is completed, it's time to start getting traffic to it. Again, you can place this infographic on a blog post or a page on your website, or a landing page hosted in a third-party platform such as Marketo or Eloqua or HubSpot. But regardless of where you put this infographic, it needs to include a really compelling headline that tells users what the infographic is about, as well as the introduction copy to really sell your content piece and its value. And I recommend trying to keep that introduction copy to, maybe a paragraph if that. Honestly, the meat of that page should really be in the data in your infographic. And you want to make sure that it's not too far down on the page for users to get to, especially if it's an image and not a web-based infographic. All right, and so once that infographic is live, it needs to be optimized and ready for sharing on social platforms such as Pinterest and Twitter, so that we can get those backlinks for users that are interested in our content. So if your infographic is an image, obviously we want to make sure that the file name is optimized for search, and also that any keywords and page titles that are associated with it are honest and describe the infographic well. And if possible, depending on where you place this content piece, let's try and use social share elements so that you can control the messaging that shows up on social media, as well as whatever image Twitter or Facebook might scrape as well. All right, so it's actually time for a poll and a good time for me to take a sip of coffee. So let's go ahead.
Excellent, Stephanie. Thanks so much. We have a lot of questions coming in. Just a reminder, we'll be reviewing the questions during the Q&A period, but pretty active on that front. But before then, I'm going to go ahead and ask everybody a question. So I'm launching the poll right now. Have you ever created an interactive infographic? So Steph, would you mind just explaining what an interactive infographic would be really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So interactive infographics are often single page experiences, web-based, and they have interactions built into them, such as reveal tiles or tabbed content. We often see test your knowledge type quiz questions used in them. They're usually 5 to 6 sections long, but they encourage users to actually interact with the content as opposed to just seeing a static image on a page.
Awesome. Okay, so 60% of you have voted thus far. I'm going to go ahead and close this in a minute or two, or a second or two, sorry. But we like to get about 80%. So if you haven't voted yet, go ahead and do it now. It's your final chance. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, closing the poll at what looks like 79% and sharing the results. So looks like 82% of attendees have not yet created an interactive infographic. 16 have done so once or twice, and then 2% do so frequently. So there you go. The
Awesome.
vast majority have not yet explored the world of interactive infographics.
All right, well, you are missing out on quite a bit of data by not launching interactive infographics. So there's a lot of platforms that you can create to make interactive infographics quickly and at scale. I'm not going to get into it, but yes, we do have one. And our company was one of the first interactive content platforms out on the market. But you can also accomplish creating interactive infographics with code if you really wanted to do so, but it can be a little bit challenging to scale if you went that way. But either way, those of you, that 82% that are not creating interactive infographics yet, that's a lot of untapped data that you could be capturing by just encouraging users to engage with your content and your infographic, and to see, identifying any trends. So let's kind of dig into, what are some ways that you can add in some interactivity to your static infographics or your new interactive infographics. So one of the things that my team has been seeing an uptick in is segmentation paths to create a personalized story. And we've been creating more and more infographics that start out on a segmentation page where a user can either select their persona, or maybe their industry to create a more personalized experience. So you can have, kind of imagine, landing on a landing page, and it's a page that says, which one of these roles best describes you? And the user can select which one describes them. And then they're taken to an infographic that has data points that are most relevant to their role or persona. We recently did this with a customer of ours who has a software-based product, and that product is for marketers who are trying to organize events. So there's going to be certain data points that are only valuable to the marketers that are trying to organize events, but there might be data for another persona who is looking to promote their venue for an event. So this infographic allowed users to choose which segmentation made sense to them, and then we gave them only the data relevant to them. So it's a much more personalized experience. You can sprinkle in their selection in that previous segmentation path to maybe show their role. So there's just a lot of really cool things that you can do by segmenting users based on persona. And if you have a marketing automation platform that is hooked up to your interactive content piece as well, you can actually send them to the right path based on data that's already in your marketing automation. Okay, I could geek out on that, so we can move on. So another thing that you can do is test users' knowledge on quiz questions to increase their engagement with the content. So the data that you collect in a research report, for example, can be turned into true-false questions or maybe even multiple choice questions. And these increase engagement because, let's face it, we all want to know that the knowledge that we have on a topic is accurate and that we're smart, right? So I have also seen customers, put in, forms into infographics. So rather than, having a form that asks users to enter their, their first name or last name, maybe you can sprinkle those into like an assessment in an infographic. So, lots of cool things that you can do. I've also seen calculators added into an infographic to show ROI, but just quiz questions, these kinds of things, really fun to do in infographics, especially if you have really, really great data that can help users benchmark either their practices or their knowledge of a topic on the data you collected. So for content that is on the heavier side, you can add interactive components that break up that content, such as carousels. Those are often used for testimonials or quotes. We see tabbed content used a lot for product tours or like breaking up metrics on different topics. Accordions, always used in infographics for sources, right? We need to cite our sources and we want to put those on the actual infographic. So you can put those in an accordion dropdown, super, easy to do, and it shortens the page up, which is also really important. These are all really great ways to, keep the content scannable, but without removing any of the important information. All right, so platforms for creating infographics. There are several web-based platforms that can help you create infographics at scale. For static infographics, you can lean on tools such as Canva or Adobe Spark for something quick and maybe more templatized. But if you're looking for something unique, a designer can work in either Adobe Illustrator, or a platform of their choice. Designers have what works for them, and we don't always get to decide for them. So the examples that I included in this deck, while we didn't really pop into any of them, they were all created by either the designers on my team at Scribble Live using the Ion Interactive platform, or they came from the Visually network of designers. So Ion is an interactive content platform that is really great for creating interactive content, including interactive infographics at scale. Awesome. So we went through a lot today, so let's go ahead and wrap it up because I'm sure you're sick of hearing my voice. But we learned a lot, and hopefully there were some really actionable items for you guys to move forward with when building out your next infographic. But to sum up today's learnings, here are a few takeaways that I think are really going to help you guys improve your infographics and get the most results out of them. So obviously we want to aim to be informative. Regardless of our style types, infographics need to educate their readers on a topic or practice. And we want to do it in a way that they will retain that information. And so show, don't tell. Infographics are visual content pieces that include graphics that aim to draw users' eyes to key points. Try your best to keep the text to a minimum. Create logical hierarchy. Structure is important. Be strategic in what the user sees first and how you close that story. And don't be afraid to pivot. you know, let's be honest with ourselves. If this is not going to work, if we have too much to say, too much data to share, this is going to be a multi-page experience, it's totally okay to change course. And that means, when I say that, I mean, you know, there's been some times that I've been working with some of our customers and they tell me that they want to create an infographic, and then we start diving into the data that they've collected, and we're looking at what they want to say, and we're looking at what's going to be impactful to their user. And it comes out, this is an ebook. This is not an infographic. You have too much information to share. And honestly, an infographic shouldn't be gated, but with the amount of content that some of my customers have, it should be gated. It's too long form, too robust, and far too valuable to give away for free. So if it's something that you think could be a different content type, it's totally okay to move on to something else. So, you know, don't feel like you are stuck creating just an infographic once you make that decision. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining me today on this journey through infographics. Following this presentation, and we are going to do the Q&A next. You know, Lauren did mention you guys will get this deck, but I also did create an interactive infographic based on this presentation. So it's got best practices that we talked about, you know, lots of really valuable information. So I will pass that along to them as well to share with you guys. And then also the examples that I showed on this webinar that we didn't pop into, you can see them on the Scribble Live website under resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Really appreciate it. And, you know, I think from an SEO and agency standpoint, one thing I really love about infographics, and this can be the same for in-house, is that typically when you're doing anything graphical, the first time you do so, whether it's to support a blog post or to be used for outreach or something like that, it's a nice bridge into getting other stakeholders on deck, right? So I found that when doing infographics with the goal of like outreach or PR come into play, well, then the graphics that we're putting together for an outreach, SEO, or PR style campaign can also be utilized for things like email marketing, email follow-ups, things along that nature. Also, at the same time, they can be utilized for social media. Of course, you don't want to take the entire graphic and share it, but you can kind of snip it down into little social cards or infograms or whatever you want to call them. That way you can share parts of that graphic within social and get traffic back to your landing page, whether it's a blog post or whether it's a call to action to put in your lead info to get download an ebook, or whether it's the whole interactive infographic. So one thing I've found is that if you're struggling from an agency perspective to get long-term buy-in on larger projects, introducing infographics or just overall like graphic campaigns is a great way to get others within your client side on board. And then also if you're an in-house SEO and you're struggling to possibly get budget, the fact that the content that you put together as part of one strategy can be a cross-channel content strategy, right? So it's a great way to get others on board within your company as well. And on that note, we'll jump into Q&A. Are you ready?
I just want to say that I just want to say that I love that the social media content piece of like, whether they're called this type of, we call them micro derivatives. I don't even know what they're actually called, but I feel like they're just always different names.
I'll write that down.
Micro
derivatives. Okay.
I like Infogram.
Let's call them MDs for short.
There you go.
Micro Ds, Mike Ds. Okay. So first question I have is, and we got this a lot, and you kind of touched upon this in one of your later slides, but what tools do you recommend to be able to find the designers to create the infographics themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So Canva, I think if you're going to use your in-house team and you're not looking for a freelancer, Canva, and you Canva is probably one of the easiest tools out there to use. And I think that you could even actually do this without having a designer. It's a free platform, but you can also pay to use it as well if you want access to some of their more, like they have higher quality graphics that you can use if you pay the very small monthly fee of like, I think it's like $15. Great tool for that. If you have a skilled designer, Adobe Illustrator is a great place, but that's where you would want to have them, really flesh out a wireframe ahead of time as well. Canva, the templates can be your wireframe, right? So if I'm using Canva for whatever it is that I, might use it for, which is, obviously not stuff that we do here at Scribble, would be stuff that I would do for my own personal usage because I love to make infographics on my own. The wireframe is the template, right? So Canva has thousands of different templates, so lots of different options. So I would definitely look there or Adobe Illustrator.
Excellent, thank you. You had said that infographics can increase web traffic by 12% when used on a page or part of a campaign. And then when you were going through your examples of interactive infographics, you were showing how to get people involved, right? Clicking on yes or no or a poll. Have you found that interactive infographics actually work with increasing leads versus static infographics?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a couple of things that I think that interactive infographics can do better at increasing leads than a static piece is. And one of them is that it's really easy, one, to send users to another interactive experience in order to capture more meaningful data about that user and ultimately make them a highly qualified lead. So one of the things that, one of the strategies, I should say, that we find really successful here at Scribble for our customers, and we do it a lot for, well, like Pitney Bowes being one of our customers. I think there's an example in the deck of one of their infographics. And one of the things we do for them is we create an interactive infographic teaser for more robust content pieces. So, when you create like an ebook or a white paper, more often than not, we see those on a landing page, right? And so we'll see a landing page. Landing page has like 3 or 4 bullet points about that ebook or white paper, and then a form to get users to want to download them. And then the user will go on maybe and download it. We don't know if they ever read it. We don't know anything about it. But what we'll do is create an interactive infographic that replaces that landing page and gives users like a snapshot of what exists in that more robust piece so that they can engage with the content and then ultimately go on to convert. When they do convert, hopefully they're going on to read an interactive ebook or white paper, but if they download the static, that's fine too. But they're more qualified. They are more invested, and we have a little bit more information about them. We know what data points they clicked on. We know what they said to their tester knowledge type quiz questions. So while I wouldn't say that you get more leads, which we have seen it work like that in some cases, but when you do get leads, those leads are often far more qualified, which is what we really want, right? Qualified leads as opposed to just any lead.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, qualified leads are much better than box of leads.
Yeah.
We don't want to run into a Glengarry, Glen Ross style situation. So that's very cool, and that's also very good to know. Next question, which is kind of interesting, is how do you handle making the infographic responsive so they work on multiple devices? So for example, if the bulk of a site's traffic is mobile, or maybe some of the sites that they're working with to promote the infographic have more of a mobile audience, how do we make it more responsive so the user at the end of the day is not trying to zoom in on everything on their phone or scroll from left to right trying to see the whole image, etc.?
Yeah, and this is where, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about how amazing interactive content is or how amazing the Ion platform is, because that's not why you guys are here. But this is where a web-based infographic would really shine. And it also has to depend on the platform that you're hosting these experiences on. So the Ion platform, when you create an interactive infographic in Ion, it is responsive out of the box. So what we end up doing is it depends on the data that's in it, but we have created a desktop version of an interactive infographic. And then if a user visits that infographic from a mobile device, we may hide. We use like dynamic content. Without getting too technical, we use some elements that will determine certain data points that can be hidden on certain devices so that the experience is condensed. Obviously, if you're not using a platform like Ion, then you're going to be using an image. This gets a little bit challenging. So I would look to see if there's any option to have, I feel like platforms like Squarespace do have options, and this is just me using Squarespace as an example, where you can show one image on mobile and then another image on desktop. I hope it has that now that I said it out loud, but you know, that's a really challenging thing to do if you're going to be creating the experience in an image. But if you know up front that this website or this audience is mostly going to be visiting from mobile, then you need to design mobile first. You know, that should not even be, you shouldn't be, you know, wondering about creating different versions. Go mobile first and then work, you know, backwards. You know, shorten that content up, create an experience that's going to, or create an infographic that is going to look good in mobile, you know, first. And that really goes back to the point of, you know, knowing who your audience is and how they're going to be getting to this content piece. You know, that is the first step in creating it.
And not depending on text, right? We don't want to have
Right.
text-heavy infographics. Almost think of them as hieroglyphics, right? Can you read the story through images alone and understand the story, and the numbers pop out and the info pops out and just enough text. One thing I also learned really a couple of years ago on a client who the bulk of their traffic was desktop. However, when we were doing outreach, when we were contacting different sites and blogs and asking them if they wanted to, you know, cover the infographic or utilize the infographic, there are a number of sites that were mobile first, right? So one that comes to mind was the Chive. So the Chive is basically a pop culture site for, you know, 20 somethings or whatnot. And what they did was they took our infographic and they cut it into little pieces. So they made it so when someone was scrolling on mobile, they'd be able to see and digest one section at a time, and then like actually type the text in their blog post. So what we learned from that was just like with social media and the Mike D's, the micro derivatives, and utilizing multiple forms of media. Sometimes it's good to have that option, at least from an outreach or PR perspective, right? Because not all sites want to embed a giant image in the middle of a post. It gives them a chance to kind of splice it up and utilize your images to tell a story. But yeah, thanks for the tip on Ion and things being mobile out of the box as well.
Absolutely.
Let me see here. Besides your own site, the site that you would own, and social media networks, are there any other places that you recommend to submit finished infographics for publication?
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, I mean, outside outreach is definitely super important. So for some of our customers, you know, speaking generally for them, we have definitely tried with some of the Pitney stuff. They always push towards the Forbes Insights blog, which is obviously a really great place. We reach out to Content Marketing Institute. You know, I think this all depends on your industry and what, you know, where your thought leaders are and what publications are the most impactful to your audience. You know, just do that research and try and see what you can find. Whenever we create something that's about content marketing, of course, like I named a whole mess of industry thought leaders earlier and dropped as many names as I possibly can, but we've reached out to, you know, Joe Paluzzi being from CMI, you know, we've gone to Jay Baer, you know, I think those are the most important places for you to start, really, is just identifying, you know, who do the people that are going to be reading this infographic, what blogs are they reading, you know, who are they following on Twitter, And that's where it really comes back to, you need to know that audience, and you need to know, what's going to make them tick and make them not only want to share your infographic and consume the content in your infographic, but ultimately go on to do whatever that success metric is that you define for that piece of content. I don't know what, Lauren, you're really skilled and knowledgeable in the outreach. What do you guys do in that regard?
Well, ironically, one of the first places we will submit an infographic to is the Visually content gallery, because I think we've been submitting to Visually for almost a decade.
Yes.
So
we have, and that was a big misstep on my part, because Visually is one of my products. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. The Visually community gallery is really great for sharing your infographics. Absolutely.
And then, in addition to targeted outreach, one site that, if it's a great design, I wouldn't submit it if it's subpar, but if it's a great design, I highly recommend designtaxi.com. I've had them pick up infographics multiple times over the years, like really good ones. And what I found is that other writers from like Bustle or Huffington Post or sites like that will find something on Design Taxi, and then what they'll do is they'll naturally pick it up themselves, right? Which at the end of the day, from an outreach or PR perspective, is the greatest thing ever, when you can get on one platform and then other people start writing about your stuff that they found on that one platform. And usually what we'll have is either we'll have a direct link back to the client as a source, or the client's landing page where the infographic basically promotes, right? Or they'll link back to Design Taxi, which then links back to the client. So we'll have that co-citational link value, or that link flow. But yeah, I would definitely check out Visually, Design Taxi. Don't overlook Pinterest. Pinterest is great for infographics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you have all of your schema set up on your site, because that will help with your Pinterest listings getting indexed. And so I'm a big proponent for not only doing hyper-targeted outreach, but also getting your content out there where people will find it when they're doing research on a specific topic, right? So definitely recommend those platforms as well. Okay, next question. Let's see. Sorry, I kind of lost my my question. It was mentioned earlier that infographics can be used for resumes. Would you recommend utilizing an interactive infographic for a resume or curriculum vitae?
Yeah, I think if I was hiring a designer and that designer's resume came across, well, first off, as hiring a designer, if they don't have a portfolio, it's challenging, obviously, for me to determine their skill set. But if a designer was to come across my desk in an interactive resume, they would be given an interview just on the fact that they put that extra effort in. Interactive infographic resumes, that would be so awesome. But infographic resumes in general, I've been seeing those on Pinterest quite a bit. My design team has a monthly meeting where we go over trends and things that we're identifying. And one of the things that they brought this last month was several infographic-like resumes that they had seen posted on Web Designer Depot and all these different places. It doesn't make sense for Ion to offer a template for an interactive resume, because we're a B2B marketing company. Nobody's using us to create their individual stuff, but Canva has a ton of infographic resumes. I think they're really, really cool, and just a great way to not only show your creativity, but also, like, do you understand how to give hierarchy to important information? Designing a resume that shows, a clear call to action, your, important skills higher up on the page. Like, I just think that that's a really cool way to show your strategic thinking, your design abilities, and your ability to see a visual of a user journey, especially if you're in a web-based business or role.
Absolutely. That's great feedback. And it's a great way to really stand out in the crowd as well, I
Mhm.
would believe. Or just have a little, like you said, the buttons and interactivity lead to a much higher quality of response, right? So by the
Mhm.
time you've gone through and hit all those buttons on someone's interactive infographic, the next one could be hire me or set up a meeting or something like that. So nice use of calls to action, I think,
Well,
would
and
help with that.
also, yeah, and if you're the person looking for a job and you have an interactive infographic resume, and you send it out to a company as a, to try and get a job there, you're going to be able to know if they actually clicked on anything on it, right? Like you're
Oh,
going to
it's
be able
true.
to say, you know, they told me that I'm not getting this job, but they never even looked at my resume. Like you would be able to actually analyze the data that would be captured in that interactive resume. So, that's something that's also super important because maybe, I know we're falling into a thing here, but maybe like if you do send out an interactive resume and you get only engagement on one section of that interactive resume, you can optimize it or iterate on it for the next version based on the learnings of that previous, delivery. So, and this goes to just creating interactive infographics as well, right? So like, let's say you create an interactive infographic for an ebook and you get low engagement. You can take the learnings of that and make a copy and iterate on it in order to hopefully increase those conversions. That goes back to, A/B split testing things. Like you can A/B split test an infographic too.
Hmm.
I got into a thing there, but I got excited.
That's okay. It's great. It's great. And I like the connection between the graphic and getting some kind of direct response KPI mechanism from it,
Mhm.
right? That's where I see the value is from an interactive standpoint. Yes, I sent this out. This is our list. We sent this out to this many on the list. Got 3/4 of the way through. This many
Right.
did not even do anything. This many did everything else. So therefore, from a qualitative sales perspective, I know that, hey, this segment that did this 75% to 100% of it, they're the ones we want to talk to right now, right? So there's different ways to go about that. Whether you're trying to get a job somewhere or whether you're trying to qualify leads. So it sounds fantastic. One question we got a lot about was you had a slide that had, I think, Evernote, Google Docs, and then it ended with one tool that had an
Mhm.
S in the logo,
Yes.
Scrivener or something like that. Can you?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the tool that my absolute favorite place to compile research and actually to do any writing that I'm going to be doing. But for the life of me, I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But I think it's Scrivener. I don't know. But actually, I learned about that tool in a session at CMW like 3 or 4 years ago that Ann Hanley was hosting, and she was just talking about how she was writing her next book and what she was keeping her writing in. And so she recommended this tool. It's about $20. It's not, a cheap app to buy. But I immediately downloaded it because I'm super impressionable when it comes to people that, know what they're talking about. And I've been using it ever since. It's great because I have it organized, by topic. So I contribute quite often to some blogs on interactive content and content marketing in general. So I've organized it in files of like, these are the things that I've posted to this blog and this blog and this blog. And then you can have subfolders inside of it as well. It's really great too for capturing research reports and then having a section in Scrivener, that include all of your research. So it's almost like having a binder and then a binder with like post-it notes, but on your desktop. I definitely recommend checking it out. It's cheaper for the iPad than it is for the desktop, but I don't know, just try and check it out, see if you like it. If you do like it, send me a Twitter tweet that you liked it, because I just want to know that people are using it too. I think it's just a really cool tool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of folks chip in with recommended pronunciation. I think Scrivener looks like Scrivener is the winner.
Scrivener sounds good. I like that.
Yeah. So Scrivener, visually, Ion Interactive, Scribble Live. We have a lot of, well, not really an Ion, but Scrivener, Scribble Live. So Stephanie, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time today to walk through this with everyone. Just as a reminder, yes, we will be sending out a recap. I believe the deck would be available and also a video of the webinar today, not only for attendees, but also all registrants who either couldn't make it or had to jump off early. Any closing notes, Stephanie?
No, just also, as I mentioned a couple slides ago, I did create an interactive infographic of the best practices that we covered in the webinar today, which I will be sending through final QA now that this is over with some of the things that we talked about in the Q&A section, and have the team QA it so to make sure it's optimized and beautiful for you guys, and we'll get that out to you guys as well.
All right, excellent. Excellent. Looking forward to that. Well, thanks so
Thank
much. Really appreciate it. And just to let everyone know, our next SEJ Marketing Think Tank will be Wednesday, October 9th, with the team from Milestone about the top 10 CMS features to increase traffic and revenue from a lot of different things. So please, if you're interested in increasing traffic and revenue, please go ahead and sign up for that. And please look out for the recap that we'll have from today's incredible webinar with Stephanie from Scribble Live. Stephanie, thanks again.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And everyone, just to let you know, after we sign off, you're going to have a quick survey. If you could take a couple seconds to fill that out, that will really help us with our overall webinar experience here at Search Engine Journal. And we'll feel free to share the results with Stephanie and the team over at Scribble Live as well. So Steph, thanks again.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. And everyone, thanks again for attending today. It's been quite a crowd here in the SEJ Marketing Think Tank, and we'll be back again on October 9th. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.